Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching. You're very welcome to this session, to this training. This training is all about CAF, is all about the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, specifically for Azure. We'll have to cover a lot of content. Some of the things will probably take a lot of time for you to fully digest, but what I will provide you is a very clear, demystifying overview of what the Cloud Adoption Framework is. I've been presenting this topic already so many times. Each time when I present it, each time when I prepare for presenting it, I change things, I add things. It is also for me a journey, a learning journey, and I'm sure you will love my slides, which of course will be available for you. About myself, I'm not going to read all this, but in the core, what makes me happy is making you happy, or what makes me successful is making you successful. So if I can contribute to your success with your customers, you making customers successful, I will be happy. And that is what makes me also energized. That is what gives me a lot of energy. For the rest, you can read what you see there. A little bit special, maybe. I worked indeed 17 years for Microsoft as a full-time employee. I left Microsoft in 2015. I came back to Microsoft as a full-time employee last week. So I'm actually again a Microsoft full-time employee, fully focusing on Azure. So that certainly is, I think, good news in this context. Okay, that being said, let's get started. The Cloud Adoption Framework. Well, all starts with the foundation. And the foundation, of course, is Azure, is the Azure platform. And by building solutions as a partner of Microsoft, as a partner of TD SYNNEX, you actually leverage the reliability and the security of the cloud, of the Azure cloud. I don't need to defend anymore, I guess, the value of Azure as a very resilient and secure foundation. I think you all understand very much if you want to achieve the same thing fully on yourself, if you really want to create your own stack, your own physical data center, and you need to come to the same foundation, that typically takes quite some effort. That is typically also not easy, and probably even impossible to justify for the typical workloads you want to deploy. So building upon a platform like Azure is probably the best thing you can do to get started. But it doesn't stop there, and that is what this session is all about. Because if you start to leverage Azure, for instance, and you deploy stuff on it, and you think it's fine, it's complete because we have chosen a very resilient and secure foundation, you are wrong. You need to enable a lot of things that are being provided to you to really make sure that it is absolutely fully resilient and secure. So the nice thing about the Azure platform is that it provides you a lot of things that you do not need to care anymore yourself, but it also provides you a lot of, in a way, features, controls, things you can activate, things that are sometimes free, some things are absolutely not free, and it's up to you to know what to activate, what to configure in what situations. And that is what this slide is actually showing. So enable a lot of these reliability and security features, let's call them, or what I love to call controls, in order to fully get to a very sound solution, a sound workload deployment. And you have two things there, you have two levels there. The first one is indeed in the middle, the Cloud Adoption Framework, which is really about enabling features related to security, related to high availability, disaster recovery, to backup, things that are there for you to use. If you don't use them, well, you don't use them, but you will probably need them anyway to come to a sound solution. And that's what we will be discussing as part of the Cloud Adoption Framework. And also the other thing that I will be discussing in another session, actually in 2 days. So there is another session organized by TD SYNNEX in Aalst. You can maybe still try to subscribe or register for that session, which happens actually in 2 days, is all about the architectural design principles. So yes, you will enable a lot of features that are part of the Azure platform. You will be leveraging a lot of optional services, let's say, like backup and disaster recovery and so on, in order to come to a real good solution. But then still, specific to your workload, Microsoft comes with a lot of best practices related to cost, related to operational efficiency or operational excellence, related to reliability. And like that, we have, actually, I will discuss that in this slide, 5 domains: reliability, security, cost optimization, operational excellence, and performance efficiency. In each of these domains, specific for each of the typical workloads, Microsoft provides us best practices, guidance, and that is what the Azure well-architectured framework is all about. So this is the session I will be doing in 2 days, in person, in Aalst at TD SYNNEX, so maybe you can still register. Today, it's all about the Cloud Adoption Framework, and the Cloud Adoption Framework can be visualized in many ways. This is one of the ways. You immediately see it's about what I call, well, some people call them 5, or in this case, 7 stages, but in reality, what you see there, each block is not a stage, but it's more like a methodology. When we talk about defining a strategy, Microsoft provides us a methodology. When we talk about planning, Microsoft provides us a methodology, provides us guidance, lots of resources, checklists, a lot of things that you typically need to do to build your solution. A nicer way to visualize this is this one. Have a look. It's actually a restructuring of the same blocks in the pre-move, during move, and post-move. And what I always like to stress here is that define strategy, plan, and ready, these 3, so 2 from the pre-move and 1 from the during move, are typically probably the most important things to think about. And even in the ready methodology stage, you are not actually deploying anything related to your workload. You're not migrating anything, you're not innovating, or you're not actually modernizing anything in the cloud yet, but you are doing very important things that are fundamental for the success, and especially fundamental for the things that you will be leveraging in the post-move phase, the governance and the manageability of your solution. And also there, Microsoft provides us best practices, tooling, things that you will want to leverage in order to be successful. And indeed, security is not a stage. It's not something you do pre-move, during move. No, it is something that is important in all the stages, actually. Well, all the stages, of course, probably all the stages, and that's what it shows. Each of these blocks will be discussed today. Most of my time I will be discussing, I think, the first 3, and well, they are all discussed, and I will make sure you understand the full framework. Okay, let's get started with define strategy. Probably, for some of us, the most boring one, but probably the most important one. It is about making sure that we understand we are all on the same page, and all, I mean we, the people offering the migration, offering whatever the workload deployment, but also, and most importantly, the customer. And when we talk about the customer, I'm not talking about the IT manager and the IT people involved, but most importantly, the business. Making sure that we have a strategy, that we have a tangible strategy, that we know what the motivations are, that we know what the business outcomes are, and that we have built a case that we have a clear business justification for maybe the migration project or whatever project you're doing. And then, of course, another thing is that we need to be able to identify the first project, because also that is a very critical thing to do, for which Microsoft provides us resources. Now, talking about motivations, you can have all kinds of motivations. And here you see a way to categorize typical motivations. It's only a way. There might be completely other ways to look at motivations, but this is a very common one. You might have what they call critical business events, like, we need to exit a data center, an existing data center, or we need to reduce capital expense, CapEx, or we need to respond to specific, more restrictive regulatory rules, requirements, things change. These are typically critical events. One of them, I don't know if it's in it, of course, a merger, but being hacked is typically a critical event. Or you came into problems because of a security issue. These are basic critical events for which you might say, well, that is the reason why we go to the cloud. But it's just a potential list of business critical events. And actually, the category business critical events is just an example of how you can categorize events. Then you have what they call migration, the migration category and the innovation category. And let me put it already up front. The more you can go to the right, this side, the more you can go to the modernization/innovation, the easier it will be for you to build the case, because the innovation and the motivation is typically much more related to being and staying future-proof, is much more related to business strategy, to actually what the company, at the end of the day, the bottom line cares about. It's about survival in this AI world. So the more you can identify motivations, business, innovation, modernization, motivations, the easier it will be for you to have a good plan also later on. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying that critical business events are not important, or that the typical migration events are not important. They are all important. And the more you can identify and the more you can formalize it as part of your case that you will actually present to the people that will pay the bill, the better the foundation is for your future success. Keep that in mind. Now, another way to visualize the same thing is what you see here. The more you go to the left, the blue balloons are like what they call migration drivers. There is a software end of support, typical thing. Maybe this is a good time to actually also, especially if there is a hardware refresh required, this is maybe also a good time to review the strategy on where things will get hosted. Will they get hosted and stay hosted in a co-location in your own data center in on-premises, or is it maybe a good moment to go to the cloud? And then you use and you leverage the migration drivers or motivations. But what you see here, the more you go to the right, and it might surprise you, the security threats is certainly a modernization driver, because in order to defend yourself in this world that we actually live, you need typically security platform, security features that I will be discussing that are clearly only available in the cloud. The kind of AI-infused security solutions, for instance, think about Defender for Cloud that we'll be discussing maybe a little bit. Think about the many things that are being provided to us through Purview, for instance, to name another example. These kind of capabilities are absolutely not available realistically when you would stay on premises. And that is certainly also an example of modernization. Same thing for compliance, and especially, of course, the same thing for, think about solutions that you typically implement towards your customers in order to stay future-proof, in order to survive, in order to stay or not become obsolete as an organization, is certainly one of them. So the more you can identify things of this type, the easier it will also to make the case, and the better it will be to realize success. Yet another way to look at it, what you see here, it will be quite easy to identify migration motivation, but what you see here in the middle, then you will identify of all the things we want or we might want to migrate, how hard is it? And the funnel becomes already a little bit smaller, but especially those things that are more related to modernization, identify these kind of things, you will actually end up with a smaller list, but this smaller list is actually what you need to aim for. Time to market, up innovation, productivity, up development velocity, things like that from a technical perspective. Voilà. So make sure you are able to discuss motivations. Make sure you are all on the same page on the motivations. Make sure you involve the right stakeholders to identify the motivations. This is actually an exercise, this is actually a service you can provide to your customers that some of you might say, this is pre-sales. Well, I'd say, no, this is not pre-sales. This is a service for which you will have the customer pay for. In my view, this is typically something that you would offer in fixed price offering. And also there, I'm not going to discuss that, also there, Microsoft provides us, in some circumstances, incentives. You could even get paid for doing it. Then business outcomes, another one is making sure you do not only understand the motivations, but you're actually able to link them and map them to business outcomes. And what you see here is how a master discoverer, because that's what we need to be towards our customers, towards our opportunities. We need to be master discoverers. And what a master discoverer typically does, he or she identifies stakeholders. And the point here is the stakeholder is not just the IT manager or the IT, or not even just the CFO. In many cases, that's almost the same person in many smaller organizations. There are certainly many more stakeholders, and you need to identify them. And for each stakeholder, you need to identify what are their business outcomes they might care about. And you might think, what is a business driver and what is a business outcome? Is that not the same thing? No, a business outcome is typically a figure, is typically something that you can also put in a KPI, like we have 30% more customers, or we have the time that when a customer asks for an offer to the website and the customer actually receiving an offer went down with 20%, that's a business outcome. And being able to relate that to something that is really close to the bottom line, the closer you get to the bottom line, the better it is. And a business driver is typically, and why are you doing this? What is the urgency of this business outcome? This is really related to we face a lot of competition of companies, other organizations that do more digital approach towards realizing value. So being able to talk the language here is being able to discuss and to convince the people that will pay the bill. And that absolutely at some point in time relates to what capabilities are needed for that. What things that is being provided by the platform, what are the things we need to implement to actually realize that. So this is just the framework, and actually you see there a link that helps you to do that exercise. Then business justification, that's not the same thing as outcomes. Business justification is actually the building of the case, and do not underestimate that. It starts by dispelling common cloud migration myths, like cloud is always cheaper. No, cloud is not always cheaper. Cloud typically is not cheaper, is even more expensive. Now, I'll come back to that point. The problem is, if you think about a typical cloud migration, a lift and ship, a rehosting approach, where you actually take the workload as is and you put it in the cloud, well, probably the cost will be higher. Yeah. But just doing a lift and shift, just doing a rehost of an existing workload to the cloud is not really contributing a lot to the bottom line, is typically not contributing a lot to the things that are more to the right. Remember, the things related to innovation, the things related to modernization, the things more related to the business. Yeah? You will probably need to do lift and shift to start with, in order to then, from there on, start to leverage more of what the platform providers, go away from infrastructure as a service, start to leverage platform as a service. Yes, that comes at a cost, yeah? And starting to modernizing your workflows, start to modernize your business processes by leveraging the cloud in a more modern way, leveraging AI. And yes, all these things come at the cloud. But if you would want to do the same things on premises, and that's the error most people make, they say it's more expensive in the cloud. Yes, it is more expensive in the cloud, but that's because you start to leverage there things you need to be successful in the long run. Things, if you would want to implement them on premises, that would in many cases be almost impossible. And if you would try it, you would see that the cost of doing exactly the same thing on premises would be higher. So in that sense, cloud is not more expensive, it is probably cheaper. But you need to compare the right things. So you see many other things, like moving to the cloud is like flipping a switch. Yes, that's certainly true for some common workloads, and especially if you talk about lift and shift, that is absolutely true. Even for SQL workloads, leveraging the PaaS options, yeah, it's almost flipping a switch. But in reality, that would be a wrong way of looking at the cloud. And that is especially very much related to the cloud adoption framework. It is very important that you make sure, as part of the business justification, you make sure that your paying party, the business typically realizes that, and make sure you do this exercise. I'm not going to read all this, but this is really, really very important to being able to talk about that. And I mean not just to the IT people, but most importantly to the people paying the bill, the non-IT people, the business people. Make them aware of these things. Make them aware that doing a typical lift and shift, I found this picture a while ago on the internet, I liked it, and you do a typical lift and shift, you will end up probably with a higher bill, because the existing challenges, like still being responsible for the security, the patching of the operating system, all kinds of things that you do not need to do anymore in PaaS way, are still there, yeah, at the cost, yeah. And yeah, being able to understand it is very important. Going to the cloud and leveraging the cloud is not a one thing, it's not a one-shot thing. Yeah, the lift and shift is a one-shot thing, but ending there and just doing it for that reason would be a mistake, actually. Yeah? Business justification, and I'm not going to discuss all this. I have many slides about just already this one, but just to give you a nice overview, typically also helps you to explain them, yeah, from a technical perspective, scalability. That's one of the most heard reasons, that you can probably better provision, more aligned to the real needs, that you have a more dynamic provisioning, that you only pay for the compute and even the storage that you need, and that whenever there is a spike in the need, the system can adopt. Scalability is a very important thing. And very related to that is availability. If there is a big peak in the need, well, the system stays available. From a security and compliance perspective, what I said, in order to be secure and compliant these days, trying to achieve that purely on leveraging on-premises infrastructure is almost impossible these days. And it's certainly very expensive, making it also a financial benefit. Capacity optimization, again, it's very related to right sizing actually, and only have capacity that you pay for, that is needed. And then you have, of course, the OPEX story. You have the reduced data center footprint, clearly. The staff productivity, staff, the IT people, will probably focusing on more things related to things that at the end of the day, the business cares about. And maybe also, probably also the sustainability is something we all care about. And even in the long run, from a financial benefit, there is certainly a case to make that it is a financial good thing to do, to think about sustainability. Create a business case is about being able to set the correct scope. Being able to say what is the technical and what is the financial scope. Really define it very well with your customer. What I mean there is, if the cost of the people is not important for them, sometimes that is, they say, well, these people work here. Yes, they are responsible somehow for the technical stuff, but we need them for other stuff. Please do not take that into the equation. If that is the case, make sure that that is clear for all of us. Typically, it is not true what I'm saying there, but that's the kind of discussion you need to have. Make sure that you clearly define the scope. What technical things are into the scope, what is not into the scope, what needs to be compared and what not. Set a baseline, a financial baseline. What is the cost of running the things today? And that is very related, of course, to the scope. Make sure that you know what the cost is of doing what you do today. Projections, that's an important thing. The on-premises cost in an on-premises scenario. And that's actually, in my view, one of the most underestimated things. Remember what I said? You could say, yes, on-premises, that is the cost. It's very low. Doing the same thing in the cloud is more expensive, probably. But your projection, the word projection is not just about what is the cost today. It is about what would be the cost in 3 years, given where we want to be with the business. And that typically means, well, we need some AI stuff, we need some more secure environment, we need all kinds of stuff that probably is possible to implement on premises at a certain cost. Being able to really project that cost is not an easy exercise. But it's probably one of the most important things to be able to do in order to dispel this the myths about one of the myths is certainly the reverse, that staying on premise is always less costly. Yes, if it's a pure lift and shift, but who cares about a pure lift and shift, really? Projections on premises cost in Azure scenario. What I mean there is, even if you go to Azure, you won't go fully to Azure. You will probably, very sure, keep things on premises too, and that also comes at a cost. There is that's all very related to the scope. But again, it's about the projection. What would be the cost on premises in the long run if you go to Azure? Typically, this goes down, but it doesn't go to zero. Keep that in mind. And then, of course, another very important thing, doing the migration will add cost. You as a partner of Microsoft, or you as a partner of TD SYNNEX, you will get paid for it. And yes, Microsoft does do a lot of incentives to bring down that cost, but anyway, there is a cost. Meaning that going to the cloud is not only typically more expensive for lift and shift, but there is a peak in the cost, additional peak in the cost for doing the migration. And that's the reason why you will need to be able to justify the full journey in the long run, the modernization phases and so on, because this cost is certainly what typical technical, well, non-technical people do not understand. So we go to the cloud and it's only more expensive. So why did we go to the cloud? And then we come back to the motivations. And then we come back to the right side of the motivation. Yeah, but remember, think about the stakeholders, think about the drivers, most importantly. Being able to do that discussion and enable your IT manager, for instance, to defend himself internally with a case that you built is important. Voilà. This is a little bit financial technical slide, but still I will try to explain it. If you try to do what we just did in the slide, you typically would talk about, yeah, we have servers. We only use, we have servers, and 50% of the cost is the cost of the servers, the software on it and so on. Then we have a building, we need to pay for the location where the servers stand. We have power, we have people managing, and we have network, and there is a cost related to that. That is one way of looking at it. And then if you go to the cloud, from a P&L perspective, and that's a very important thing, a P&L perspective, so really from an accounting perspective, it typically looks like that. You go to the cloud, meaning that your on-premises cost goes down and down. That's what you see. At some point in time, you still have cost on-premises. It's not zero, but what you see here, only after 7 years, you typically reach the point that you want to reach from an accountability perspective. Don't try to understand that too much, but from an accountability perspective, that's because things you pay for typically are, how you say that in English, I don't know, you need to depreciate them, afschrijven, from an accountability perspective over 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years. So at some point in time, you see this point. Now, the nice thing is, that is a P&L perspective, but here on top you see the exact same figures, the exact same graph actually, but there you see the CapEx cost, the OpEx cost, and most important, the sunk cost. And what you see there is, if you take away the sunk cost, I'll explain what sunk cost is in a way, is that you achieve actually the point of lower cost, typically 2 years earlier, because of the accountability stuff. So that is because the sunken cost is very related to investments that you typically do, and that you need from an accounting perspective, you need to put in the books. If you go to the cloud, all of a sudden you have less capex, you start to have less depreciations, and your cash flow is bigger. You have more money at your hands. And the sunken cost is a sunken cost that's already spent actually earlier, and that's what it tries to say. So that from a financial perspective, this sometimes helps. The most important thing in this slide is then still the Azure cost comes in, and what it tries to show you here, and that's a very important thing, is that it tries to tell you, and what you see there is also the migration cost, and the green one is Microsoft brings the migration cost down because they provide us tooling and even financial incentives. But then still you have the peak in year 1, absolutely higher cost. And that is the point I try to make. And the red line is a very important one. The red line is very related to what I said, the projection of the on-premises cost. Not just projecting what it would cost to do the same thing as we do today, but projecting what it would cost on-premises to achieve what we want to achieve with the motivation, the drivers, on-premises. And that means that the red line will typically be higher than what the blue line would be. Now, this is quite theoretically. Behind this, there is an Excel file, actually. You can play with it. If you go to that URL, you can download the Excel. This is not just, I did create this based on this Excel file. You can play with it. And the point is, this one, between the Azure case and the quota case, you have actually the Azure transformation value. This is actually the business case. if you are able to defend the motivation and the drivers, and then you can say, well, yes, it comes at a cost, yeah, and the cost is, the migration cost. So there is a spike, but in the long run, you will see that you will end up at the price point that is lower than what you would end up if you would stay on premises. And I hope you understand this. No, this Azure transformation value doesn't come for free. And that is where the Cloud Adoption Framework is all about. If you do not leverage the Cloud Adoption Framework, if you do not leverage the well-architected framework, if you think I go to the cloud with click, 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 and you stay to do IT in the way you used to do IT, especially from a Windows perspective, click, 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 yeah, probably you will not be able to realize this transformation value. Wow. Whew. Voila, so that's a nice story, I think. And then Microsoft provides us a lot of things that you could immediately use as part of the business case, like the hybrid benefits, the reservations, the fact that you could use Azure Dev and Test pricing for some of the resources, and on the spot virtual machines. So, and there are many more things that you can leverage. You see some links there that will help you to actually immediately in the beginning already defend your case. But again, keep in mind, this is not the core of defending the case. This is things that will help you in the beginning to defend the case. Defending the case is much more related to the modernization part I'll discuss later. And then, of course, still related to cost, you will need to do the exercise. Microsoft provides us the Azure Cost Management and Billing as part of the Azure portal to really do the correct projections. That is one thing. But related to well-architected framework, remember, well-architected framework is about these 5 perspectives: cost optimization, security, reliability, operational excellence, and so on. And I always forget one, but I'll come back to it later. They nicely map one to what you see in the Azure Advisor. I think Azure Advisor is one of the least known and most undervalued resource, free resource in the Azure portal that I know of. It actually provides you free advice, nicely aligned to the 5 perspectives of the well-architected framework. One of them is cost, telling you exactly, seeing what you run in the cloud, telling you exactly how you can optimize the cost, bring down the cost that it's typically about. And of course, you still have the hybrid benefits, the reservations, and then, as you will see me talk a lot about that, once you do the mobilization, the landing zone is all about making sure you implement policies to control the cost over the life cycle of your workloads. So again, we show you here in this slide already some of the things you can leverage to manage and to govern your workloads from a pure cost perspective in the long run. And again, you can neglect this, you can ignore this, but this is very crucial to actually realize the transformation value. Keep that in mind. And then identify the first project is a very important thing. I'm not going to read all what is on the slide, but depending on what your motivations were, if it was typically related to critical business events, then probably do a project with Azure Site Recovery is probably a very wise thing to do. If it's much more related to a typical migration, a SQL migration, a VMware migration, of course, then probably focus on the Azure Migrate service and the Azure Migrate landing zone and things that we will discuss. If it's more related to innovation, probably make sure that you start to leverage GitHub and AI that is being provided there. Very important. There is again a nice template you can download to do this exercise. As you see over there, that's certainly this. See, define strategy probably took a lot of time to discuss, but I think it's probably one of the most important things, and it's probably also the one that you do not do today. And why we do not feel comfortable as an IT with this. But on the other hand, leveraging the resource I just showed you will help you a lot. And then still, there is still to do a plan. Now, a plan is not about mobilizing anything. It's not about actually doing anything physical in the cloud, but it's then you have actually your motivations, you see, you have your business case, but now you need to do the plan. And also there are probably many things. Cloud rationalization is about the 6 R's that we'll be discussing, making sure that you understand that. The incremental approach, yeah, it's very related to large IT estates, where you probably will want to identify 10 applications, which is typically already a lot. Remember the first project, identify the first workloads, the 10 workloads, applications, migrate them, spend a lot of time with that, and then you have the power of 10. Once you have done that, it will be scalable to absolutely start to scale and leverage what you learned during that phase for probably the other 100 other workloads. And that's what they try to say. It's all about prioritizing your backlog. It's about looking at the possible things you could do from a migration, from a critical event perspective, from an innovation perspective, having the understanding who is a stakeholder, what will be the return, when we will see the return, and so on. It's about prioritizing your backlog, and that is something you will be doing a lot. It typically ends up in what they call the bronze, the silver, and the gold, or whatever labels you want to use to tag projects or to tag applications to do so. The nice thing is, keep that in mind, Azure Migrate, and especially also Doctor Migrate, if you already heard about that one, helps you a lot in doing actually this one very nicely. And then there is the costing model. If whatever you choose as your workloads to start with, leverage tools, most importantly like Azure Migrate and Doctor Migrate, which is not free, but if you have a specialization, it is free. To give you a point, the pricing calculator, the cost management, there are a lot of things that you will be able to leverage. Keep that in mind. This is a slide I created, I think 6 years ago or something. It's still valid. If you check this website or this slide deck, or you check actually the last session I did for TD SYNNEX, about migrations, check this slide deck, which gives you a much nicer view on the same logic here. The point is, and Azure Migrate helps you a lot in doing this exercise, is identifying, discover your workloads, and most importantly, assess them. And as part of the assessment, it will tell you exactly which workload is rather a replacement, is rather a rehost, a rebuild. It will help you to do that and will help you to identify which is bronze, silver, and gold, and so on, and keep you focused on doing the right things. I've created many versions of this slide. Here you see another one. I'm not going to discuss it. I used to do that a lot in the past, but I think you already know this story. Point is, modernize, you see, is not starting a rehost, it's not starting in lift and shift, it is starting in the re-platform, the refactor, when you start to use PaaS. See? The rehost is typically IaaS. And yeah, nothing wrong with migrating, nothing wrong with rehosting, but it's typically only the first step that you need to do in order to do the modernization. Yeah. A more simplified view on the same story is here. Migrate is the rehost, and re-platforming is starting to leverage the PaaS services. Move up the Azure stack, not just do infrastructure service. And the goal, the end goal, is to really start to create modern workloads with microservices, with containers, not virtual machines anymore, Azure functions, what you have, and actually start to leverage infrastructure as code, and probably more and more, what is the name? I don't know, but prompt, infrastructure as prompt or something, leverage AI more and more also in doing your job. But typically your focus should be there to get started. And this is a nice slide that shows you that next to lift and shift virtual machines, the top one, there are many more services related to what you probably want to achieve, that you will want to leverage as part of the platform, that makes the platform so valuable, that makes it so difficult to copy on premises, especially if you want to realize the things you have been identifying as the drivers. See? Voila, this is the rationalization, have a plan on that. And then you have the need of a cloud adoption team. I'll discuss that later. And you need a governance team. It's important that you understand that this is not the same thing. To help you understand that, I created this slide. An adoption team is typically related to inventory workloads, migration applications, the setup of the landing zones, which we'll discuss as part of the next methodology, configure network connectivity, implement DevOps pipelines. And it's really a very foundational stuff that needs to be done, which is related to adopting the cloud. So the adoption team needs to adopt the way of working in the cloud. And only once that is done, the governance team can leverage your landing zones, that has all kinds of policies, for instance, can leverage an airbag from a security perspective, and so much more. Of course, like the monitoring features, and certainly also Defender for Cloud, in order to do the governance, the life cycle management of part of your cloud estate. So this is important that you realize that these are two teams, and I'll talk about cloud adoption plan specifically in a moment, but that's important. It's also important to realize that the typical skills, the typical like function titles even will change. What used to be called like a DBA, probably will be maybe a data scientist or an information architect. It's not just a change of fancy titles, but it's typically completely different skills. Meaning that the existing people, yourself included maybe, well, you might need to reskill yourself. And that is not only true for you, but it's probably also true for the customer. Make sure if at the customer side, there are people involved, that they also start to talk the same language, or you'll have one of the ingredients that leads to failure. And also specifically the cloud adoption plan, what I try to say is, and I'm going to go through that very fast, is that Microsoft provides us a template, actually, a framework, a way to do actually what you see here on the slides, based on Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps is not just for developers, but you can use Azure DevOps, and Microsoft shows it through this link on how to do that. And I'm going to go through these screenshots very fast with you. And by the way, you can find it on this URL. And actually on this URL, you see also other ways to if you're thinking about Windows Virtual Desktop, if you think about SQL migration, Microsoft provides us each time a tooling to do that. Specifically for Cloud Adoption Plan, if you need to create a Cloud Adoption Plan, you select the template, you end up indeed in DevOps, and here you see the result. And actually, this is a screenshot of doing the exercise myself through the link I just showed you. Do that exercise. It will take you half an hour. I'm not going to discuss it at all, but it shows you very nicely how you can actually do your cloud adoption plan, how you create your cloud adoption plan based on the theory we just discussed. A lot of screenshots I'm not going to discuss because of the timing. We only have 1 hour and 10 minutes left to cover a lot of things still to come. So cloud adoption plan. So at this stage, we know why, we know how, why and how. We still need to do the what. We still need to do the actual migration. But before actually doing the migration, we need to do the ready methodology. It's like if you are in the army and you go to war, you do not go just to war, you mobilize. You mobilize the people that will go to war. You set up your camps. You make sure you're ready to actually go to war. And that is the ready phase. That is my personal touch on this story, because mobilization, you hear people talking about that more and more. Mobilization is still not going to war, right? It's a way of going to war. It's like, get really ready to go in war. It's not doing the actual migration yet. Keep that in mind. Maybe I should create a slide about that. So it's very related to what you see there, the Azure landing zone. That's actually, if you go to war, you mobilize, you set up your camp. It's like setting up your landing zone, setting up everything to actually then do the actual migration. Now let's discuss that a little bit. Again, it's about a few things. It starts by understanding the operating model of the customer today, of probably also your operating model. Depending on the size of the organization, you might see that the operating model is different. And that is already related to what are we trying to build here. In the physical world, depending on you're going to build a stadium or a bridge or just simply a house, yeah, your mobilization, your preparation, your fundamentals that you need to create first will be different, right? So if you're building a house, your planning zone, your fundamentals will absolutely look completely different. But typically, when you build a house, some people already did that before you, and there are best practices. There are templates for doing that landing zone, for doing that fundament. The same thing goes for a bridge. The same thing goes for a stadium. But depending on what you're aiming for, you will end up with a completely different ready set of tasks, and you will be leveraging a completely set of different templates, landing zones actually. Yeah. Now the other thing is, depending on how big your organization is, if you have a very much decentralized organization, small organization, a startup typically, well, you have a workload, and as some workload, you do not think too much about landing zones and infrastructure relating landing zones, application specific landing zones. You just say, you might and you probably will leverage best practices, well architectured framework even, and you get things done. But once you are in a typical organization, you have central operations, meaning there are some the blue ones, the platform landing zone, let's call it the infrastructure landing zone, the things that are centrally managed, typically related to identity and security and network topology and things like that. These are typically very much centrally managed, and everything that needs to be deployed on top of it needs to be deployed on top of it in a very aligned and centrally managed way, including typically also the specific landing zones, the specific plumbing you will want to have in common and also centrally manage, and then the workloads come on top of it. In the enterprise, you might see that the application-specific landing zones might even be also distinct, depending. Imagine, for instance, you have SAP in your organization, then you probably have a very specific landing zone on top of the infrastructure landing zone specific to SAP. To give an example, see, and then you have the distributed environments. That's where we end up typically always. Another way to look at it is this one. If you, from a motivation perspective, the first one is very, very much about innovation. The second one is about control, that you will something you recognize. The third one, it's an interesting one, is democratization. The idea is that at some point in time, you start to delegate, you start to trust people, you start to trust teams, you start to make sure that it's not just the central IT people that are in charge of everything, and even typically block innovation, block things, modernization. At some point in time, it's better to delegate stuff, to trust people, but have a governance framework to make sure that they are trustworthy, of course, and they stay trustworthy. But it's very related to the democratization. And of course, integration is once you start to have a complex environment. The scope, well, the scope in this center is a workload. The scope in central operation is the landing zones, typically only 2. And the scope, and that's again the important one, the scope in enterprise operations. And we all need to aim for enterprise operations actually, even for small deployments in the long run. really aim for this one is about the cloud platform. See, a cloud platform is not just about lifting and shifting things and put them in the cloud. It's about having these landing zones and probably having multiple landing zones. And then, the workloads, the accountability, it's clearly the Center IT, Cloud Center of Excellence. See, I think this one is the one to aim for. And again, does this help from a pure technical perspective? Maybe not, but then again, you need to be able to talk the language. This is a very useful thing also to sell your solution to your customer, that you show that you understand how in the long run IT needs to be run, needs to be managed, needs to be governed. And then Microsoft provides us all kinds of implementation things. Again, if we are just talking about a startup, for instance, decentralized, the well-architected framework is your friend. If you talk about the central operations, Microsoft provides a lot of landing zones, accelerators actually, to actually get started immediately and immediately have landing zones that work for everybody. And there is actually, again, this thing that we need to aim for, Microsoft's enterprise scale landing zone. That is probably what most of us will want to end up anyhow. And Microsoft provides us easy ways to implement that. And that's what I will show you. The landing zone conceptual architecture, that is this one from a highly prospective view. It shows us all the things that you need to plan for up front. A very old slide actually. And this slide is something I created based on this very nice video of John Saville. You know, John Saville, the big guy, the very successful Microsoftie on YouTube. I think you all know him. He also did do a session about Azure landing zones. And what I did here, I just, what he was saying was, this is actually a script that I created of what he was saying. He showed us like click, 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 click. And then at some point in time, you start to ask yourself, am I deploying in a secure way? Am I deploying in a scalable way? Am I cost optimized? Am I using the right tools? Am I already following press? Now, this is wrong. If you start to have these questions while deploying, while migrating, which is, remember, methodology or stage number 4, you have a problem. These things should be solved and should be taken care of in the ready methodology, in the ready phase. And this is very related to, not ClickOps, but it's very related to using ASOps and DevSecOps and so on. You get the point. And more also, I forget the name, but it's where you start to leverage also AI. I should update my slide. So what is a landing zone? I'm not going to read all this, but it's a landing zone is focused on unifying technology and technical guidance to help you build a successful cloud environment. Remember, your cloud platform, your cloud environment is typically based on best practices, landing zones, both at an infrastructure level and at an application level. That's what you need. At the end of the day, and I remember when I learned about landing zones, this slide made a click with me. A landing zone is typically a subscription. That's also why they call it democratization, where you do not end up with just one subscription in the customer. You have a subscription for each of the specific areas for which you have a landing zone. That's a very, so each landing zone maps typically to an Azure subscription. Keep that in mind. That will help you a lot. And here you see, actually, I'll show it. This is the enterprise scale landing zone. That's typically the one you will be aiming for. It shows you top down, first of all, what they call the management groups in Azure. Then it shows you the subscription. So each of these yellow things is a subscription actually. And what you see, for instance, in the middle, you have there a management group at level number 3, platform. And then you have under platform, you have everything related to identity. Next to it, you have everything related to management. And connectivity. And what you actually see then on below that is 3 subscriptions. For instance, the left one is an identity subscription. So it's an Azure subscription that implements everything related to identity, Azure ID, Entra ID, yeah, which comes with a specific policies, with specific network. It still shows security center, but that is probably old slide. It should be Defender for Cloud. So it's about making sure that at that level, in that subscription, you implement everything related to the identity in a central way, so that automatically, if you come to the landing zone for applications, for instance, this one, that it leverages the policies and the best practices that you have implemented at a higher level. Voilà. I'm not going to go deeper on all this, but understanding this as an IT professional is crucial. Being an IT professional and not talking this language, you're not an IT professional anymore. Sorry to say so. This is really a core skill, understanding this and being able to manage such a landing zone. If you're new to that, learn about it. This is really fundamental knowledge. And again, you need to be able to translate that into business talk. And then the design areas, actually what it tells you is, it's all about these things. It's all about identity, as I talked about. It's about network topology. These things typically, and then it's also all about these things. And these are the 8 design areas in total for which you need to make decisions. And the point is, these decisions should not be afterthought. These decisions need to be made. And also specifically when you create an application landing zone, made aligned to that specific workload. At the infrastructure level, or what Microsoft typically calls the platform level, all these things matter, and all these things need to be taken off up front in order to be successful in the long run, running and managing and governing your workloads to the cloud. That's what this slide tries to explain. And what are the implementation options? I already discussed this a little bit. The implementation options depend. By the way, of course, we do not all have, most of the time, not at all, even the luxury of starting with the green field, the first one to start. But if you have such a situation, make sure that immediately you start using the enterprise scale landing zone or one of the other accelerators and start with that. Do not make the error in starting with click. Make sure you also leverage infrastructure as code, use Git or DevOps to manage your deployments, use Bicep, do it right. If you need to align a typical situation, of course, you have existing environments that probably are already or not already using Azure Landing Zones. Well, Azure Landing Zones need to evolve, and they need to enhance over time. And that is an exercise, that's a skill as a company, as an organization. It's IP also at some point in time, is that you create your own, flavors of landing zones, but make sure that it is as much as possible aligned to the insights Microsoft implemented in their landing zones. Because also Microsoft is learning. Also Microsoft is fixing errors actually in earlier version of landing zones, is learning from the field, is learning from you, is learning from actual large projects. And it's not because it's about large projects that it doesn't count for you smaller projects. It's about leveraging things that are costly if you need to implement themselves, and stay aligned and make sure you do not do that as a one shot. And then yes, if you would want to implement them yourself, it would take you a lot of time, but it would make you realize at some point in time that you actually end up there where Microsoft provides you already a template. And yes, it will not be 100% the same thing, but still, you might have lost a lot of time by trying to do all this yourself. It's better to leverage what Microsoft provides us through the accelerators. And well, in the Azure portal, and I think this is a slideshow, that's a screenshot I took a while ago already. You can actually start an Azure Landing Zone accelerator, and you, just like you will deploy any other resource in Azure, you know the drill, you know you need to go through this wizard. But have a look at the top, the tabs there, and there you nicely see the things I just discussed, the things that are related to, to the things that you need to think about up front. And you can actually go here, review and create, and you get immediately your landing zone. And you can always change things and activate things and deactivate things, but it's very interesting to learn about these things and maybe immediately, especially from a network topology and connectivity, it's typically a thing that you will need to implement, hub and spoke, your VPN setup. It's all the stuff that you end up doing anyway, but why not leverage actually a landing zone for that? Will make you even more successful in the long run. This is an example of something that will get discontinued in July. There is also what they call a blueprint. The concept of the blueprint will be, will actually be discontinued. But the blueprint, the word blueprint is still valid. I mean, that's what we are talking about here. Typically, a blueprint will be implemented, or let me put it differently, a landing zone going forward will more and more be implemented by using Bicep. Learn Bicep. Check out this blueprint, because this blueprint actually, if you zoom in, shows you actually, for instance, a typical migration landing zone for doing a typical lift and shift. If you do a typical lift and shift, at least check out this landing zone. It's a very interesting thing. Actually, if you do the migration with Azure Migrate, this will actually leverage this landing zone. And again, you can try to do everything yourself and make mistakes, as we all do, of course, and learn from your mistakes, but it's better probably to learn from those that already made the mistakes before you. And then apart from that, you have alternative approaches for customization. That's actually also the story that we tell to customers, because at some point in time, you will create your own flavors of landing zones, especially if you're a development company. If you create very custom-made applications, then probably you have a landing zone, application landing zone specific for your specific workload. You will probably leverage Terraform or probably also Bicep if it's a fully Microsoft environment to actually implement these things. Learn about that. This is important. This is a very interesting resource. I used to do this in workshops. Follow these links and you'll be able to learn about landing zones in a very click-through way, but I absolutely recommend you checking this out. It's very interesting. Really, I mean it. Really good resources. Voila. That is where we are. We are now actually in the adopt. So we have a clear view on the why, we have a clear view on the how, we have a clear view on everything that is needed to be successful. So we mobilized, we are ready to go to war, we are ready, to actually do the migration. And you might think, well, give me best practice on migrating. Yeah, there are many best practices on migrating, but the most important best practice is make sure you did do the pre-move things and make sure that you are ready to actually do the migration. So adopt indeed. So adopt is the deployment phase, is actually the deployment phase. And also there, check out the slides. I put it on that. The level 200 slide deck, really nice slide deck, much better than what I'm showing you here. These are my old slides. The new slides, you will easily find them on partner.microsoft.com. Go to the solution play related to migrate and modernize your real estate, IT estate. That is actually the name of the solution play. And that is one of the 6 resources that Microsoft provides. And again, depending on what you're migrating, like Windows Server, you have options. Here, for instance, you see if you are doing typically lift and shift and EAS or exercise, this is what it looks like. It's a virtual machine, right? Also for VMware, I'm not going to discuss this at length. You might end up in the second one, VMware Solution, AVS, which is kind of a lift and shift. For your VMware, you are actually lifting and shifting the exact same thing, but put it in the Microsoft environment. That might be a good approach. The nice thing in all these approaches is that you always have, of course, Arc enablement. Yeah, of course, if you EAS, yeah, the first one, you automatically have that because it's an Azure resource. You could also go to Azure Local, which becomes more and more a common way of doing it. Stay on premises, but still leverage the Azure as much as possible. And again, Azure enable whatever workload you put on Azure Local. Yeah, it's not possible to do it in a different way almost. Well, there is, you can do it completely disconnected. And then of course you have still, you can actually run VMware on premises. You can of course still do that, but it's grayed out a little bit. I don't think you want to do that. And then of course you can go to your own on-premises Hyper-V. And if you do not understand, Hyper-V, Microsoft is all about Hyper-V. If you do something, even if you're not aware, I went to a session of MC2MC last week, a nice session that really convinces very much. If you would think that Hyper-V is dead, if you would think that Hyper-V is not mature, Hyper-V is much more than just mature. It's very strategic. It's still there, and it's getting better than it is already today. So don't underestimate Hyper-V. Hyper-V, I think, is top. Indeed, if you talk about applications, if you think about SQL Server, also from the modernizing existing .NET applications, again, you have PaaS versions. You can actually start to use PaaS for SQL. I'll show it in a separate slide. But for typical .NET applications or any other line of business application in any other stack you might think about Node.js and so on, you might have been leveraging. There is a certain flavor in the app service, the Azure App Service, that you can nicely leverage, including many other operational, very useful things that the app service provides us as a platform, as a service to actually migrate your existing web application. And so this is certainly the next step after a lift and shift. If you talk about SQL Server, you have multiple options. The first one is, of course, the infrastructure as a service, the one we just discussed. But then you have the options in the middle, which are, again, more about PaaS, where you also probably need to re-platform a little bit and maybe even re-architect. And there you have the two options that are important. The first one is the managed instance. What's a managed instance? Is that Microsoft is actually the SQL Server underlying infrastructure, the VM actually, but you have a full access to a SQL Server instance. It is managed to some level by Microsoft, but from a compatibility perspective, you have probably the best option there. It's best of both worlds. So you have PaaS, you have full compatibility, full control over the SQL Server, but not anymore at the level of the infrastructure, let's say. And then, of course, going forward, you will not want to have the control anymore on the SQL Server instance itself. You will want to go to a database. And actually, Microsoft implements that, of course, not anymore as a virtual machine, but implements these things as containers, making this also much more you can move them at some point of time to Azure Local, for instance. But Azure SQL database is probably also, from a cost perspective, at some point in time, what you will be aiming for. It's less compatible, but it's absolutely compatible. I mean, there are, and again, if you use Azure Migrate, I will discuss that, it will help you to discover where you have incompatibilities, and it will tell you very exactly for each workload, SQL workload, and not just SQL, but also other database workloads, what the best match is, and also what the cost would be, and what the projection in the long run would be of the cost. Always everything nicely Arc enabled, whatever your choice is, very important, of course. And again, that's important here, what it will bring you. The first one, you do not have any more certain hardware, you do not manage that, you do not software manage anymore of the virtual machines. In the middle, it's about operational efficiency and saving. So what I said, the cost perspective and all the other perspectives like operational excellence and reliability and things like that, all of a sudden are being managed by Microsoft more and more. And you are actually able to leverage more of the controls of the platform to actually have a better operational efficiency and even saving. And of course, business agility. One of the options which is not on the slide is Fabric actually. If you use Fabric, which is actually a SaaS solution, as part of the Fabric SaaS solution, you can now spin off a SQL database. So probably in many cases, that's even the yet better solution, especially from a business agility perspective. Being aware of all these options is important, and this is a very nice slide which shows you how they compare, the ones I just discussed. You might think, why is this white level there? Yeah, if you have a SQL database, there is not any more a real SQL Server instance involved anymore. It's a container actually. It's actually SQL database. It behaves like what you would get from a SQL Server on premises, but it's implemented with modern techniques. It doesn't involve any SQL Server anymore that needs to be managed, also not by Microsoft, and that's why it's being shown blank here. You're managing the database, you're managing the data, you're managing, of course, the application. See, that's the difference. Okay. This is also a nice slide to help you decide, should I go to a managed instance, should I go to a database? And actually this is again an old slide because Fabric is also one of the valid options. More and more, I think for many of us, the Fabric option is probably even the better option. I'm absolutely convinced about that. Not sure if you realize that it's not just about SQL Server, and especially also once you use Azure Migrate, it helps you also to tell you how whatever you use as a database or a data service or data platform actually to what Microsoft provides. That actually also includes, of course, Redis, but certainly the PostgreSQL and MariaDB are there. Cosmos DB is the last one, is actually Microsoft's object database, Microsoft's own implementation of an object database, which is typically the better option, especially in the greenfield context where you're building commerce websites, for instance. For the migration tooling itself, again, typically being handled by Azure Migrate, behind the scenes, and it shows on the slide, behind the scenes, it uses, of course, things like the Azure Data Migration Service or the Data Migration Assistant. And very important, that's the nice thing about Azure Migrate, it nicely integrates with third-party tooling plugins actually to do this migration in a very pointed, a very specialized way. So again, this is actually a slide discussing and the value of Azure Migrate. It's a service, it's a free service, Azure Migrate. And probably also you will want to check out Dr. Migrate, which is not free. It's a third-party tool, which is promoted a lot by Microsoft as being an even better tooling. Because one of the disadvantages of Azure Migrate, I'll discuss it now, is that you need to deploy an appliance. You need to deploy a virtual machine in the hypervisor of the customer. And for some of the customers, they don't like to do that. Dr. Migrate provides the same service through a SaaS, so you do not need to deploy anything. Of course, then other people say, wow, SaaS, I don't want to have a SaaS solution actually scanning my IT estate. Wow, still, if you want Dr. Migrate and you want to use the SaaS option, you can, of course, also deploy an appliance if you want to. And that is one of the big stories. Now, Azure Migrate is about discovery, about assessment. It's about the right size, the first step. It's really about making your plan, knowing what comes, creating your case, and then actually do the deployment. And again, leveraging all kinds of plugins and third-party things. If we talk about the Migrate, again, it provides us tooling for lots of workloads. We'll discuss that. But whatever you do, it's always about an Azure Migrate setup. You need to discover the VMs. You need to review the assessment. And at the end of the day, It's about a system that does do the migration by replicating VMs, by leveraging Azure Site Recovery, by leveraging Azure services like backup and so on to do the actual migration. Again, you could do these things all yourself, but it is leveraging all this in a very managed, in a very controlled, nicely governed way. Again, here you see, if it's just a server, database, and web app is the first one. If it's just a database, or if it's just another scenario, one of them is, for instance, virtual desktop infrastructure that you might want to rehost, actually, leveraging Microsoft PaaS services for doing actually the VDI. Microsoft provides us actually the tooling to do that kind of a migration too. The typical thing we demonstrate is the first one. And anyway, this is just an overview slide. It's about a lot of tooling that is nicely brought together. And it's not just something that Microsoft created a long time ago. Yes, they did do so. And it's not just something that they created for large enterprise. Yes, they did do so. But the point is, this evolved so much, and it is still evolving. It's getting actually still better, and it's actually a no-brainer, especially if you need to do it for smaller organizations too. Leverage the best practices of what Microsoft has been using for large deployments. And every colleague that is successful with migration uses this already, or at least uses Dr. Migrate. So not using it is a mistake. If you zoom into the discovery and the assessment, yes, it is actually scanning your environment. It is actually giving you recommendations on the sizes, the cost of the choices you make, and it also makes a dependency analysis between the virtual machines, for instance, making sure that whenever the migration actually happens, that those machines that need to be deployed together are deployed together or migrated together, and that you are not having problems with connectivity between the systems. And then, well, analyze high overview. It's always about discover, assess, and migrate. For instance, for the server migration, the typical one, you end up deploying, well, downloading actually an appliance. You can download an appliance for Hyper-V. You can for an straight on the metal. You can do one for VMware, Hyper-V. You have all kinds of flavors of the appliance. You need to deploy it. You need to activate it, configure it, and connect it actually to your Azure Migrate project. Again, Azure Migrate is free, the appliance is free, so all this is completely free, but there is work to do, and Microsoft makes it easy. Then you do the assessments based on that, and the assessment is actually showing you what the discovery tool did do, and it will actually do a nice mapping towards which one is ready, which one is not ready, how does it match to certain sizes and certain SKUs, helping you taking the correct decision. It also helps you, and that's a little bit related to the next slide, which is about relationships between virtual machines, of course, but it helps you to group these ones. And also there, Dr. Migrate does that in a more sophisticated way than what Azure Migrate does, even while Azure Migrate is getting much better on doing this exercise. It's also there, and I should update my slides, where Microsoft shows you the 6 R's. It tells you exactly for each of your workload, and especially Dr. Migrate does that even better, shows you actually how that maps to the R's. And the dependencies, I discussed that, which is quite important. See? And then the actual migration is leveraging what I said, the things, the tooling, also third-party tooling, where appropriate, to do the actual migration. Actual migration is always about creating the resources, the virtual machines at Azure, prepare those machines at Azure for replication, and then prepare the virtual machines for replication on premises, and then actually replicate stuff. And migrate. And again, just as before, if you want to get a touch on it without losing time in setting up everything yourself, go through these exercises. If you're completely new to it, trust me, this will make so much sense. It won't, It will take you 1 hour to do all these exercises. And what I mean with exercise, you do not need to code or something. You need to click and listen. Click and listen, watch, click and listen. You will like it. This is really, really good stuff to get to learn about it. Voila. And now we have done the migration. And it doesn't end there. Now we need to do the security. And of course, we start by doing the post-move stuff, which is the governance. Now, governance, what is governance? And we still have an half an hour left. So I will do all these topics in half an hour. It's a lot. I'll tell you up front, but make sure I will give you a governance ID. Governance, in my view, is about what I should put here is about how you control the cloud use. Yeah? You did do the migration, you might have done a lot of modernization, you might go to the right more and more, but then still you need to control the use of the cloud. It's the life cycle, the long run management. It's about setting up guardrails that things go wrong. You will do democratization, you will allow people to do things on their own, you will trust teams, people, but you need guardrails to make this work. And that starts by building a cloud governance team. And a cloud governance team, that's what it shows here in the slide, is typically a team that engages the right stakeholders. And that's easy to say, of course. I'll discuss that in a moment. It's about assessing the cloud risks. What is a cloud risk? And on all these topics, Microsoft helps you. I'll show you. It's about developing and updating policies to actually implement the governance. Policies typically, an implementation. And then you monitor and review also the governance. It's life cycle stuff. Now, what you need is actually a governance team, and then the question comes, what is the authority and the scope of the order? And that's where the RACI matrix comes in. What is a RACI matrix? RACI stands for responsible, accountable, and consulted and informed. And what you see here, the governance team next to executive sponsor, cloud platform team, the work teams, they all have their responsibilities, or they have all their, well, not responsibility, but all they have their tasks. And for instance, the engage the stakeholders is as a governance team, you are actually responsible for that. It's not the executive sponsor that needs to identify the stakeholder. It is the people of the governance team. They need to consult, talk to, and have a connection with the stakeholders and know what the stakeholders care about. They're also accountable for engaging. See, that's fully responsibility of the engagement. Another thing is the second, that says the cloud risks is fully accountable, accountability of the cloud governance team. The cloud platform team is certainly responsible to in that way. So this is actually, I'm not going to discuss all that, but this should help you in discussing it also with your customer, in showing that you're really mature towards your customer. So that's a RACI matrix. And then assess the cloud risk, probably the most important thing, because it all is based on that. Now, a cloud risk is about, many things. And let me show you. You need to identify the cloud risk. And as I said, one of the tools that helps you a lot with that is Azure Advisor, and certainly also Microsoft Purview. But Azure Advisor and Microsoft Defender for Cloud, I think all of them actually are actually helping you a lot with that. It shows you, it gives you actually recommendations on things that might go wrong. It's like something you do in a proactive way. It's actually making sure that that's what Defender for Cloud is all about. Not about just being proactive, also about being reactive, but cloud risk is about making sure your attack surface is as small as possible. And these two tools, Cloud Advisor and Microsoft Defender for Cloud, but all of them are useful for that. And Microsoft helps you with that, depending, and there you see again some areas, if it's related to AI, if it's related to cost management, if it's related to data, it helps you to show you the typical domains in which you need to think about risks. So for each of them, there is a lot of documentation so that it helps you to identify the cloud risks per area. There are multiple areas to define. And then you need to analyze. Now, a risk is one thing, you name it. But then you still have like, okay, but if that happens, what is the probability that it happens? And what will be the impact? And these two together should give you an idea of the priority. The more probable it is that it happens, and the bigger the risk, it should get the highest risk. And for those cloud risks, you need to have a better plan, mitigation plan from the others. And then you typically will assign a risk level, clearly risk threaten. If it's really something, if the risk is level 1, it's really like, if it happens, it's really a problem for the organization. And for each risk, you need to have a strategy. You want to avoid it, or you say it will happen anywhere, we need to mitigate it. If it happens, we need to transfer it to something, or we need to accept it. You need to think about it. And it's again, in discussing with the stakeholders, the business typically, you'll come to the correct decisions. Microsoft helps there in how you document risks. And here you see an example. A risk always has an ID. Make sure you have an ID for risk. You have a risk description. You have a category. Remember the probability, the risk impact. Here's nice examples. Who is the owner? You see, it's a very nice example, and how you will work with them. The mitigate comes up a lot here. All mitigates, yes. So very nice. And this is all part of the Cloud Adoption Framework. Cloud Adoption Framework comes with a lot of these kind of resources helping you. Then you need to, of course, you need to document the governance policies. We did that a little bit already with the risk, but you need to implement the policies. What is the policy? It's not even implemented, it's about, what is our in Dutch they say, what is our beleid? What is our policy for all these things? And again, it's about, first of all, defining a policy. And I created this slide. It is, a policy has an ID, it has a statement with wording like must, should, must not, shouldn't, clearly saying what is your policy. You always relate it to a risk ID. So you typically have a policy in order to cope with a certain risk, right? And it's identified by risk ID. You need to include the category policy, like before. You need to specify the policy purpose. Somebody's talking, maybe mute yourself, please. Define the policy scope. And first, and of course, the remediation strategies. Remember what I said about strategy. So again, let me show you. So distribute, review, example. Here's an example. Yeah, it's a nice one. Again, the policy ID, it relates always to a risk, always in a certain category. A statement, and like multi-factor must be enabled for all users. That's a very stupid, well-known example. But another one, almost in the middle, Azure Advisor customer must be reviewed. And that's a nice one, because Azure Advisor, remember what I said about it? It is there, but it's underused. It's underused. And having a policy that needs to be reviewed on a regular basis is a statement, of course. How you implement it and what you do to make it happen. The remediation is mandatory optimization, or mandatory optimization audits after 60 days. And you need to monitor that. You need to monitor that. And that is all part, remember, of your landing zone. This is all part of your flavors, of your IP, and how you are mature and how you will be able to scale your IP, your business to more customers, even smaller customers. And that is especially the point here. Voila. I still have 20 minutes, so we are okay. And for cloud governance policies, that's of course, you have a policy, but how you will enforce them, how you will make sure that this reviewing, for instance, of the recommendations in the advisor is being done. And that is what you do with what you see here. And you might already know it. It's very related to things like policies. Azure policy is your friend here. So define an approach, and that is typically by, you will also delegate governance responsibilities. That's an important one. Yeah. You will, and that leverage inheritance model. You might recognize what you saw already in my slide about the landing zone. It is about management groups, about subscriptions at the end of the day, and about resource groups. And the point is that each level, even and especially starting at the management group level, you define policies. Some policies are really that critical, that common, that they need to be implemented at that level, so that you absolutely manage risks at the lower levels by making sure you have policies at the top level. So you leverage this inheritance model of policies, and that's also why it's so related to subscriptions, actually. Voilà, I should not have. Voilà. The other one is the specifics. Let me skip that. So you need to. Well, the point we're discussing is it's not just something you put on paper. It's not just something you implement. It is something you discuss, you make people aware of. And that is not something you do in a one shot. You need to make sure that you do that regularly, that people are aware of the policies, that they also have an occasion to give their feedback, and that you manage also the life cycle of your policies. And this is very important. A policy should not be too restrictive. What I try to say here is that you have what they call a monitor, let me go back, a monitor first approach. So a policy should not necessarily restrict things to happen. It should at least trigger a notification of some kind, a report, an audit, so that based on that, you might decide to make it more restrictive. In the same sense, make sure that your policies are rather a block list and not allow list. You typically add things you block instead of saying we only allow this, because then you will again go too much to the central management, being not just unpopular, but actually take away success in the company actually to innovate. Applied tagging, and some people laugh when I talk about that. Applied tagging is like, not that you go to a certain deployment and say, well, Pete did do that because I can see it on the naming tags here. Okay, no, the naming tags, that is one of the things you can also implement specifically at the highest level or at the application level, workload level, whatever. Make sure you have a convention on it. Whatever convention it is, make sure you have a convention on it, because this will help you to be more proactive, and especially will help you to be more scalable. Because tomorrow Pete might not be there anymore, but you still have to manage that customer. And by leveraging the tag naming conventions, you will be very successful doing that. You get the point, I guess. Most people laugh when I talk about that because they recognize the situation. Yes, use a lot of automation, clearly. And Microsoft provides us for each of these areas, automation, leverage that, but also do a lot of things manually. Microsoft provides us as part of the Cloud Adoption Framework checklists, a simple checklist that gives you a way for you to create you implement your restrictions and your policies. And based on doing it manually, you might at some point in time start to automate stuff. And there's nothing wrong with doing it manually. Review enforcement, that I already checked by discussing them. And again, Microsoft provides us examples. You can check them yourselves. The monitoring of the cloud governance, that's actually monitoring the lifecycle management. It's saying that it's and also there provides us a lot of resources. I'm not going to discuss it actually to actually do that. And depending on, and for instance, the last one, configure monitoring for cost management, analyze cost, conduct a cost analysis, create budgets, that's one of the Azure features, gather cost data, use the cost optimization recommendation of cost optimization. And Microsoft provides us a lot of things and checklists and what you see here, and actually actually concrete resources for you to leverage. See, on all these topics, there is many things to leverage. The red team language models, I don't know what it is, but it clicks, it sounds important. Voila. See, going back, and again, there is this checklisting, very important, very nicely structured. If you love checklists, well, there you have them. So the idea is, of course, you didn't start in many cases with the cloud adoption framework. Of course, you didn't start even with the landing zone. Well, it's not too late. Go to the checklists. They will help you still to fix things in a very, not proactive way, but in a very, what is the word? To the point. That's not the word I'm looking for. I don't, in a very, you know what I mean. Tactical way. And then the manage, it's not the same thing as governance. Manage, you need to manage stuff from, daily management of the system also there. There is a structure of doing that. And it's actually the methodology that I'm going to discuss here. It's part of, first of all, you need to establish what they call a baseline. A baseline, of course, is about, you need an inventory, you need observability, you need visibility, and then once you have the inventory, you know what you manage, you know what your state is, you need to keep it operational compliant, you need to protect it, and for each of these topics I will give you some details. And then make sure that whatever you do, that's number 2, it is always very aligned to the business, and that's a very important thing. It's important that whatever decision you take and whatever tooling you decide to use, because these toolings and these efforts come at a cost, it is important that you are able to explain to your management why you take this decision. Because you cannot do and use all the available tools at Microsoft because they come at a cost, and not everything needs to be managed as thoughtful.
Não adianta nada estar a ver isso, isso é que eu estava a ver que isto estava muito para a frente.
Sorry, can you mute yourself?
Ele ficou na agenda às 10 horas, mas não era às minhas 10, às 10 dele.
Can you mute yourself?
Já está no fim.
Faltam 5 minutos para acabar. Mute all, voilà.
Era 2 horas.
Voilà, I muted everybody. Voilà. So the point with it is, whatever tooling, whatever decision you make in number 1, make sure that you be able to link it to why you do it. Because it is critical, because it's impact, because you got commitment. If the management do not understand why it is critical and why it's impact in their language, why is it impact for them, why is it critical for them, they will not see the justification, understand the justification of what you did choose in the first place. And you need to have commitment upfront. And that's part of what you do in the first phase. And then actually the advanced operations, depending on specific, and again very related to this one, you will go to specific implementations, and that's quite interesting. Voila. If you go to inventory, inventory is I'm not going to discuss. It's a lot. It shows you the tooling. You see here the tooling you can use: Azure Monitor, Azure Activity Log, DNS Analytics, Azure Network Watcher, especially. All these tools are there. Some are free, some are not free. And again, keep in mind, these are examples of suggested minimums. These are things you will be using. Make sure that it's part of what you do in order to manage. These tools are there. Make sure you use them. And then at the operational compliance perspective, again, you have tooling. And again, one of them is Azure Policy. Remember? Azure Policy is your friend. But also Azure Automation Update Management. I think they changed name now. I'm not sure. No, Azure Automation Update Management is certainly one of them. Think about what they call configuration drift. that's certainly something you want to avoid. It's a risk, yeah? Use things like update management. Infrastructure as code, of course. Desired state configuration. All these things, especially also for things you deploy on premises through Arc and still being able to leverage these things. That are suggested minimum things to use. And then for Protect, this is very much related to Defender for Cloud, but especially also to Azure Backup. See, this is very related to the minimum things that you will typically leverage as the baseline. Again, let's zoom in again to this business alignment. What I said, make sure that you can make people also in the business understand why you do these things, because of mapping to the things we identified in the first exercise. And then, depending on your workloads, you will add advanced things like what you see here. Advanced things that you might want to, like Sentinel, the resource graph, Azure automation. Again, Defender for Cloud is again there because Defender for Cloud has specific SKUs for specific workloads, for containers, for the Vault, for IoT, for SQL Server, specific things you can add to Defender for Cloud for specific subscriptions or specific resource groups or specific resources. Yeah, and that comes typically at a cost. But again, because of the fact you are able to identify that it's not because it's cool, no, it's because we do it for that SQL Server, because that SQL Server is part of a very critical ERP application, a very critical business application. So people understand the impact if goes wrong. See what I mean? So make sure that you make this exercise. And then, of course, you go even further for a platform specialization. Think as SAP or whatever thing, you will be leveraging even more tools. One of them, of course, is the first one, is the well-architectured framework, which comes even with more things. Not only in the cost perspective, but especially in the operational excellence perspective. In the operational excellence perspective, you'll see a lot of recommendations specific to specific workloads. See, again, not knowing all that and just going to the cloud and hoping it will be better. Yeah, if you really want to realize the Azure value, the transitional value, you need to do that. Voilà, and even more like application monitoring, leverage application insights. That can even be at the level of a Power Automate or especially a Power application, Power App like Canvas app. Implement, and that's just a click. You need to set the application insights, especially those related to performance in your custom-made application. Leverage that. It's almost free, almost free. Well, it's free at the site of implementing it, but of course you need to pay for application insight because this uses storage, this uses even compute, and that's what you will be paying for. Again, you don't do that for everything. That's why I call it advanced operations. But for some workloads, some critical workloads, remember this one, you will be able to justify that. Voilà, that was the managed. We still have 10 minutes for the security one. And the security one is, yeah, again, a whole story. But the nice thing is here, remember what I said, security is for each phase, for each methodology is important. And this slide nicely summarizes it. So for each phase, it explains how security is related to the related to governance. And this slide, there's again a checklist, and each one is a link. Understand the security teams and roles. Integrate security into cloud adoption strategy. And then you can see from an availability perspective, from a confidentiality strategy. See, this sounds and this looks like very enterprise, but then again, even for the smallest deployment, yeah, you will want to learn from this. You will want to gradually leverage these things. You will at least want to be informed about what is possible so that you can actually, as part of your IP, as part of your landing zones, as part of your your solution offerings, you are able to shine, to differentiate yourself and successful. Very important. Voila, all things that you can leverage. Very nice. So that was the only thing I want to discuss about security. Voila, we went through the full cloud adoption framework. I'm pretty sure that most of you didn't really have a good view on what the cloud adoption framework is. I'm quite proud about these slides. I've been creating these slides during the last 5-6 years. Must say I've been changing a lot since the last 6 to 9 months. Even while I'm pretty sure that the content at Microsoft got updated a lot in the meantime, but I know for sure that the principle, the idea, the structure still stands, and that for most of us already just this view on what I shared with you might help you also only already from a pure commercial perspective, because that's how you should look at it also. If you're into pre-sales, if you're an architect, even if you're a sales professional, pure sales professional, being able to use this language will make you successful. If you are more responsible for, as an architect, internally building your IP, this is your guide. And especially if you go to the Well Architecture Framework, that goes deeper into technical stuff. But leveraging these things is what will make you successful. This is cloud computing. This is how you leverage public cloud. It's a completely other business than doing on-premises IT. This is what is success. You can leverage an assessment. It's a nice tool. You see the links here, especially the first one. The first one is actually the customer can go through it. You can go through it for yourself, or you can do it for your customer. And you actually will answer a lot of questions. And at the end of these questions, you get a report, a little bit like it shows there, show you exactly where you have work to do, where you are going fine, and so on. So it's also part of the cloud adoption framework. Also related to governance, the same story. If you are creating a landing zone, if you don't have a landing zone, you don't know exactly yet what a landing zone is, going through this assessment will help you to identify in what design area you might need to do some work. You see a screenshot there how it looks like. And then you have Microsoft Learn. I'm a big fan of Microsoft Learn. This learning path still is a very valid learning path. If you want to learn, actually, my slides are created based on this learning path. That's how I started creating this slide deck. So probably, if you like Microsoft Learn like I do, go through this one and even show it on LinkedIn that you went through it. Be proud about it. Also, the one about landing zone is nicely discussed. Here you see some specific links more. I'm not sure why I put that there, but then again, it's part of the landing zone. I don't know this guy, Patrick. I've heard a lot of you already. Maybe you listen, you watch my video, but I watched your video a while ago and I liked it so much because as part of the cloud adoption framework, there is a section about patterns. And the patterns are very interesting, but you did create a video about anti-patterns. And it's quite nice to watch it from the anti-pattern perspective, because it then talks about all kinds of things that, typically myths and misconceptions that are really common, still common. And it's yet a very other way to introduce people to the cloud adoption framework. I like this one a lot. So once again, if you watch my video, Patrick, congratulations, and all of you watch it. Enjoy it. It's also very short. It's only 12 minutes. So he does do what I do in 2 hours in 12 minutes. Really, really good. And again, the framework is what it is. But it comes with a lot of checklists, it comes out a lot of things you can use at any stage in your adoption journey. Even if you skipped planning, even if you skipped everything I discussed in the pre-move, it comes with a lot of things that you can immediately use to fix stuff. And that's what I call the getting started guides. I like the getting started guides a lot because it helps you to handle common blockers. Here, for instance, if we zoom into the adoption journeys and the getting started, and we go into accelerate adoption, here you see, for instance, such as a checklist, accelerate migration. So you already are doing migration, but you didn't know about adoption framework. Well, still, it tells you what you can do to get aligned, like align stakeholders, align partner support, if you're a customer, gather data and analyze assets. And each time it shows you how to do it. Make a business case. It's still not too late. You accelerate migration. You might already have sold it, but no, accelerate it. Cost misalignment, typical thing. You did do the deployment and manager said, wow, this is more costly than you said. I don't like it. Yes, it tells you then how to fix these things. Operational support, again, build a cloud operations team. That's something that is valid for all of us. And also the customer, a checklist. So this is also part of the cloud adoption framework. So it has many phases. You have a top-down perspective, but you also need to check out these journeys. And again, these journeys nicely map to the methodologies we just discussed: strategy, plan, ready, and so on. Voila. If you're a little bit like myself, I love to push the bar, and I hope I'll be able to do that another 12 years. I'm 55 on Thursday when I do the Well Architectured Framework. I still hope I will be able to do that at least 12 years, because that should be our mindset in order to be successful in the cloud too. Don't be a know-it-all. Nobody should be a know-it-all, but try to be a learn-it-all. Success. Et voilà, here again, the slide deck that I'm not going to discuss. I don't discuss this, but I just wanted to show you this single slide in order to end my presentation. It's a very nice slide showing I was like 6 or 7 hours. I will make sure that this slide deck, the slides of the level 200 slide is also included in the slides that you will be able to download as a PDF. But then again, check the solution play, migrate and modernize on partner.microsoft.com, and download the full slide deck. Voila. Thank you very much, and a lot of success with the cloud adoption framework. Stop recording at my side. For those people that are still watching, you can always ask a question. Let me check also the Q&A. I don't think I see Q&A, and the chat. Chat. Nobody has questions. That's because my explanation was so good. Okay. Okay. Nobody has a question? Let me wait. Just 1 minute, but I don't see. Voila, at least somebody who's giving feedback. Thank you very much, Dylan. Dylan, did you like it? Will you be able to leverage it? Will it be useful? Was it new to you? Too much? Too little? Yeah, no, you have to answer, right? Yeah, good point. Intimidating, that's really the good word. It is intimidating, and I think my introduction to it puts a little bit on structure, puts a little bit structure on it, and makes it less intimidating. Good word. Yeah, I had the same feeling, and that's even worse with the Well Architectured Framework. That one is even more intimidating. But at the end of the day, especially the well-architected framework is more like a Bible. Yeah, some people read the Bible from page 1 to page, I don't know what page, but yeah, probably the better way is to read whatever is relevant in the moment. You're welcome, Gio. Hope you also enjoyed it and you learned something of it, and you will be able to leverage it in order to be successful. Okay, I'm going to close the event. Enjoy your day and a lot of success.